That we are agreed, because actually a matter of law.
I would like to.
Yes.
Sir, yeah. I would like to chip something in. Thank you very much for the exposition. It was quite engaging because I was paying attention to everything you were saying. So, and I agree with your submission. But conversely, can't we also look at it from this angle that these clubs have come together? They've seen themselves as the superpowers in the European, on the continent, and they've come together to form a very powerful force, which is detrimental to most of the other teams. So this particular ESL now it can be seen as another undertaking, which is detrimental to the general marketplace. Because, for instance, now what happens to the other clubs? For instance, if Bayern Munich or Dortmund does not join in this particular undertaking, and we have the likes of Arsenal, Chelsea, and then Barcelona, Real Madrid forming this powerful, what happens to them in respect of European competitions? They are at a loss, and it is detrimental to those teams. So some particular teams have come together to form an undertaking, which is detrimental to most of the teams in Europe. I don't know if you get it from that particular angle.
Okay, I hear you, but the truth of the matter is that everybody has a right to, develop greater commercial aspirations. By that, I mean, it's all about the economics of the sport. So having said that, you would all have to cast your mind back to 1991, when 20 football teams pulled away from the old English football division, where they agreed to form what you know today as the English Premier League. Now, there was a lot of noise. Perhaps if we had social media the way we have today, perhaps that dream would have died because of the way the fans came, revolted and everything. But we all know what has become English Premier League since then. They've been growing from strength to strength. So there's really no limit to what anyone can aspire to. I'm talking about that they are constituting themselves into superpowers. Well, it's all about the way you look at it, because the truth of the matter is that ball operates a very cartel. When you look at the likes of FIFA, you look at UEFA, I mean, they come to Africa and they tell you that their laws are superior to your national laws, that your national laws are only applicable to the extent that the FIFA statutes allow them to be applicable. Then you go to Europe, there's a separate interpretation of that particular rule. I stand to be corrected, but I don't think in recent memory that there has been an incident like this where FIFA and maybe CAF are taken to any regular court or national court in Africa to thrash out issues like this. But such issues are amenable to decisions or determination by the European Court of Justice. So you now begin to ask yourself whether FIFA themselves have not set a very bad precedent here, because if I remember correctly, there's an ongoing initiative to establish an African Super League. By the proposal made available to a number of the clubs in Africa, the entry fee to participate in the league is $20 million. And that is what they require from any of the teams who are interested. The likes of Simba FC of Tanzania, JSK Kabylie of Algeria, Zamalek of Egypt, Al Ahly of Egypt, Orlando Pirates. These are the ones Petro Atletico of Angola. These are the clubs who definitely have the financial clouds to enter into such leagues. Now, in the same breath, the same regulator is fighting the establishment. No one is bringing it, or no one is extracting any form of obligations from FIFA. All the 12 clubs are saying is, please, let us form this parallel league. We are not making enough money from, I'm not getting enough money from the initiative we are presently superintending as far as the continental showpiece is concerned. So it becomes a problem. It becomes a problem for both the competitors and the potential competitors, because the ECA rules specifically refer to horizontal agreements or horizontal relationships, usually the one between a competitor and a potential or an actual competitor. So these teams have come together, like I said, to say, oh, let us set up a rival or a parallel league where we can make much money. The regulator that is spearheading the formation of the same initiative in another continent is coming to tell them, no, you cannot do it, you are ruining football. That is double standard, that is easy. But I'm not here to bore you on all of that. To answer your question, whether the 12 clubs are considering them superpowers, like I said, it depends on how you look at it. If the essence, the end game of all this initiative is for the teams to make more money, I don't think anybody should vilify them. They are not saying, oh, that we are wresting power from FIFA, from UEFA. You remember very, very well, immediately they announced this initiative, Agnelli and Ed Woodward both resigned their positions in UEFA because they don't want any form of conflict of interest. So maybe UEFA and FIFA should come out and tell us exactly what they're afraid of. So that is the way I look at it.
All right. Mr. Steve, I don't know if I can add to what you just said.
Yes.
Yeah. It goes down to asking the very fundamental question of what is the substratum of a competition law, or what they call antitrust law. The essence is to, in my own words, allow the big boys play while also allowing the small people also play in the same field. So the essence is to provide a level playing field for everybody who's interested in entering the fray. Now, in answering Ayodeji's question, one needs to ask the fundamental question. If the renegade clubs decide to succeed from whatever structure holds today, does it stop the others from playing? Of course it does not. Of course they have their own fan base. Of course they have their own revenue track. Of course they have their own structures in place. Like in the English Premier League, it's just 7 out of 20 clubs leaving. So they allow 17 to play, and it doesn't by any means restrict competition as far as I'm concerned. It gives fans the choices to make, which one should I watch, which one should I not watch. That does not in any way infer that the renegade clubs are going to take competitive powers away from the other 17 clubs. In order to add to what you just said again, I think these things evolve over the years. If you had to have this conversation in, say, 1993, certain clubs would not be there, like Tottenham Hotspur, Chelsea, and the rest of them. Probably they will be replaced with folks like Olympique Marseille, probably replaced with folks like maybe Auxerre, I'm just saying. But the beauty of football and the competitive commercial nature of football allows clubs to aspire commercially. So you see today, 10 years later, nobody's talking about Marseille in this kind of equation. 15 years later, nobody's talking about FC Porto. Clubs aspire. And that's the beauty of this kind of competition in football. Do the renegade clubs have what it takes to take away competition from whatever UEFA is putting in place right now? I sincerely do not think so.
That was a wonderful observation, ID. Because if you remember very, very, the clubs came out, they said they are going to have 15 permanent members of this elite club, elite division, football division. However, The other 5 teams would engage in some kind of playoff where they would qualify to play every season. Well, that might be a cartel, but rules always evolve, because it simply means someone was analyzed on B last night, and he said, so what it simply means is that Manchester United can be relegated from the Premier League and still qualify the Super League this season. So that is a conundrum. That is something that they themselves have not even been able to clarify. It's something they also need to look at, because it removes the competitive spirit in sports. A club like RB Leipzig that was founded less than 20 years ago, obviously, if we start looking at the antecedents of European teams, it will not even be in the equation. But like Marcelo Bielsa said two days ago, he said, well, that every team can always dream. That the beauty of the competition is when a team files out and beats teams. But when the big teams continue to themselves week in, week out, it removes the excitement and the element of surprise, from the competition, and then you begin to question the sporting merit of the whole arrangement. So that is by the way. So let us look at the employment law implications of this particular move. Are there employment law implications? Yes, if you remember very well, there have been rumors about a possible ban of players of the ESL clubs, banning them participating in any UEFA organized competition. Now, Ayodeji, do you think that there will be cause of action part of these players, clubs, for more or less putting them in this position, because it couldn't be within the contemplation of both parties at the time they entered into their employment relationship that they won't be able to represent their respective countries. Every player wants to be regaled with that honor of representing your country in one continental or world showpiece, as the case may be. Now, you take that away from a player. The player has every right to be banned. So do you think from an employment law perspective, that these players have some kind of right of action against?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Nwabueze. That is a very great question, because that was the next legal argument that would arise from this circumstance. So basically, personally, I feel the players have a right of action against the clubs, because they've been put in a very difficult situation. Why? Okay, I'm playing for, say, Manchester United, and Manchester United has decided to break away from UEFA, and FIFA has said I'll be banned as a player. Why? Because I'm a player of Manchester United that has decided to break off from UEFA Champions League. And my contract is 5 years, and I can't breach my contract and say I am going. I will suffer from that particular action. So what I feel is the way out of this is, before clubs take their final say or have their final say on this, they should engage players in something we call participatory democracy, and have discussions with them about reshuffling or renegotiating their terms of contract. Ask them, do you want to stay or do you want to leave? If they want to stay, it's their choice. If they want to leave, is also their choice. So you renegotiate the contract, because you have, by this particular action, all the teams involved have basically recharacterized the nature of contracts. For instance, in most footballers' contracts, they usually have clauses of bonus that if you play so matches in the UEFA Champions League, you have this point. There's none right now that says if you play two number of matches and you score 2 goals in the ESL, there's no provision for that. So the player is basically at loss. So what I feel the clubs should do, not to run contrary to, because this is, if they continue this way without renegotiating the terms of contract with the players, I feel any employment court would hold that as a breach of contract, because that was never in the contemplation of the parties when they were entering the contract, and it was the sole action of the clubs to put the players in that particular circumstance. So I feel the club should engage the players in a kind of renegotiation and know what they want before they have their final say on pursuing this voyage. Yeah, that's my own take on this, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Fantastic answer. I like that. But let me also put it in another way. Can the players of the EOS refuse to play for the clubs on the grounds that the expectations arising from this initiative were not within the contemplation of the contract? You when you said that they should renegotiate, but hypothetically, let's say they didn't do that, or they haven't done that, and the players say, okay, you know what, because there were hush stories about player mutiny in the EPL clubs involved. John Henderson, the Liverpool captain, called a meeting of all the captains last night as well. So it was all part of the drama that eventually caused in the seeming collapse of this initiative. So can the players themselves now go back and say, you know what, we are not playing for you anymore. We are down in tools because you didn't tell us that we will be playing the ESL next season.
Yeah, I can hear you.
I am a certain Lingard that is interested in representing England in the World Cup in 2022. And it was within the context of having sporting expectations, especially at the national team level. And maybe that's the reason I inserted that clause, or that clause is inserted. That's why I am putting pen to paper to agree to this deal with a Barcelona or with a West Ham or a Manchester United. And then after I might have appended my signature to your agreement, few years later, or a year to the World Cup in Qatar, you're now involving yourselves in actions that seems to negate the rationale behind the contract I signed. I think it's a ground for probably renegotiating the contract, like Ayodeji said, or terminating that contract on the basis of commercials, footballing just cause. So that's my opinion. Just like the clubs have the rights to bring up bonuses, and the player is indebted to the club to play at any time he is fit, the clubs also have a converse responsibility and obligation to me to protect my interests while playing for the club, and furthermore looking at my national team outlook in terms of participating in FIFA's competitions or UEFA competitions. So it's a quid pro quo kind of thing. So this arrangement with the ESL completely changes the dynamics of what was the state of affairs as of when the players signed this contract. It has drastically changed. And like Ayodeji said, it's something that calls for probably renegotiation, or players may be tempted to terminate their contracts. But it's something that will keep the courts busy. That is, they're going with this. And let's see how events unfold. Mr. Steve, can you hear me? Mr. Steve, can you hear me?
Okay, I lost you for a point there, so I didn't know when you stopped.
All right, okay. I'll do a little recap again. I said that
yes,
I think it's clause 6 of the contract signed by players at the EPL, and I think that such a clause will be replicated naturally in other contracts signed by other players in other leagues. It puts two obligations. The first obligation is that the clubs, the players must comply with FIFA's rules, statutes, UEFA, and the FA Premier League. That's number one. It goes on to put a proviso, include a proviso that says that the clubs do not do anything that would stop the player from playing for his national team. Now, these are the commercial realities and the sporting realities a player bears in mind while signing for that club. So let's say Lionel Messi, who is crazy about winning the World Cup for Argentina by next year, or I am a Jesse Lingard who's interested in representing England at the Euros and also the World Cup next year. And it is that mindset, that sporting expectation that is at the back of my mind that made me append my contract with probably like a Lionel Messi, extend my contract with Barcelona, or a Jesse Lingard, extend my contract with probably West Ham. And after I appended my signature accordingly, a few years down the line or months down the line, you're now telling me that you're participating in the European Super League, which will, by all intents and purposes, stop me from participating in the World Cup, which I am crazy about, which will stop me by necessity from participating in the Euros in 2022 or thereabout. That shows that the quid pro quo relationship between the club, what I mean is that while I am indebted to the club to play whenever I am called upon or whenever I am fit, the club has a converse responsibility and obligation to me to make sure that I am allowed to go play for my national team. This circumstance of playing with the ECL for the EASL right now encumbers the player effectively from playing for the national team. That is assuming this goes on. So I think it is a ground for, one, like Ayodeji said, for the parties to renegotiate the terms of their contract, or probably allow the players terminate such contract when it doesn't meet their sporting expectation, and probably they could bring it under sporting just cause. These are jurisprudence that may be evolved by virtue of this participation, the ESL. I think it's a flurry of activities that will happen, and the courts will have no option but to step in at this particular time in football jurisprudence. That's my thought. I said that clause 6.1 of the players' contract signed in the EPL provides that clubs have the responsibility, both clubs and players have the responsibility of complying with the trial of the FIFA rules and regulations, the UEFA rules and regulations, also the FA Premier League rules. And it goes down to say that clubs also have the responsibility of allowing players go to play for their national team and should do nothing to stop them from carrying out the obligation to their national team. Now, this entire mix of what is happening right now in the last couple of days has thrown spanner into the works of the wordings of some of those contracts. So I give you an example, like I said earlier, Lionel Messi, crazy about winning the World Cup in 2022 with Argentina. And probably that may be the sole reason he's extending his contract with Barcelona so he could keep fit and play with the best players in the world so as to get ready for Qatar 2022. And probably Jesse Lingard, who may want to continue West Ham so they can be available for selection for England in 2022 Euros and the World Cup as well. Now, as a player with my commercial and sporting expectation, more especially the sporting expectation representing my country, I have appended my signature to a contract. I've executed a contract. And then months or weeks down the line, a club is now coming to tell me that I am to participate in a competition that effectively encumbers me from taking part in the World Cup, which I am crazy about as a Lionel Messi, or taking part in the Euros. Now that throws up a very peculiar scenario. The club has commercial expectations just like I do, and I also have sporting expectations as a player. Now, where the club, who has an obligation to make sure they do not do any activity that stops me from representing my country, carries activities that seems to be against the wordings of that contract. I think it's my thought, and I stand to be corrected, that such a player may bring an action for that contract to be terminated. He may bring up a defense of probably sporting just cause or sporting expectations. Because I can also plead as a player that why I decided to continue playing for your club is so that I can represent my country. I could have gone back if I was an AC, if I was Zlatan Ibrahimovic, I could have decided to go back to FC Malmo. But I decided to stay in AC Milan so I can make myself fit and get ready for the World Cup. So when you now come out to say, or you're involved in activities that properly encumbers me from representing my country, I think it goes against the intent, the purposes, and probably is a fundamental term of the contract I signed with you. So like Ayodeji said, is either we renegotiate, or which I'll be compensated with monetary returns or commercial returns, or it's a ground for me to terminate the contract. So I think it's something that will keep the courts very, very busy and also evolve make football jurisprudence evolve effectively. Of course, the same law comes with the common consciousness of the people. As events unfold, the law also evolves with it. So it's a jurisprudence that will evolve by virtue of what is happening right now. And we get to watch or probably take part in these activities. Thank you, sir.
Well done, ID. It couldn't have been said any better. But I just want to add, there's also a common law principle. Both parties, when I say both parties, I mean both the club and the player, they owe each other what you call the mutual duty of trust and confidence. So a player can actually bring an action against the club, terminate for sporting just cause on the grounds of breach of trust and confidence by the club. Because you look at it closely, just like you rightly pointed out in your analysis, that it was not in the contemplation of the player at the beginning or at the time of entering into the contract that he will not be playing for his national team. A lot of players are very passionate about the national team. They don't joke with it. So I'll be extremely surprised if this becomes an issue. But should it become an issue, I think the players will have a higher bargaining power here. But let's not also forget that when we are making all these analyses, you have to also think about the practicality of banning all the high-profile players. When you ban all the players in the 6 clubs in the EPL, you have practically stopped all the big players from playing in the World Cup. And when you also remember that both Juventus and Barcelona are involved, that means Messi and Barcelona will also not be playing in the World Cup. So I think it's something that the parties will find a middle ground. They will find some kind of political horse trading that will resolve all the issues one can imagine may arise from this whole thing. So that is that. So now let us quickly round up with the intellectual law angle of this whole thing. Most of the rules, most of the domestic FA rules of the leagues, and even UEFA expressly vest the intellectual property in the logos, in the merchandise, on the organizer of the league, which is either UEFA in terms of the UCL and the Europa League, and the FA Premier League for England. And then you have Serie A and La Liga. So now, the logos of these clubs, which are already registered with the leagues, it is going to be a very contentious intellectual law issue because these domestic league organizers will most likely approach the ad hoc arbitral tribunals and get injunctive reliefs stopping them from using those logos. So I leave it to your analysis. I mean, I don't know whether anybody has any different thoughts on that.
I don't. I believe the clubs they'll be well aware of the consequences of infringing on the intellectual property rights and the actual right of maybe UEFA to the logo and all those other marks. So I believe the clubs would be aware of that and they will be very careful as not to infringe on the intellectual property rights of UEFA as it stands now. So I don't think there's anything else to say to that.
Now, are there lessons that have been learned or can be learned from this development? Because I have some very, very strong views about the regulatory lapses, both on the part of UEFA and the domestic leagues involved. Are there lessons that can be learned from this initiative?